Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thank you so much again for being a part of the conversation. I am so grateful for each and every one of you because you're learning right alongside of me. And today we have another great guest. I can't wait for this conversation I'm going to be able to have with Cara Bradley. And Cara is a best-selling author and a podcast host. She was one of the cool things. She was named one of the 12 most powerful women in the mindfulness movement in 2020. Former competitive figure skater, first one of those on this show, and who also, folks, she performed for Rollerblade. Remember Rollerblades? They're still around, I think, but around the world in her 20s. That's really cool. Also ran track in college, had two daughters that played soccer at a very high level. She's a soccer resilience ambassador. If you folks remember Brad Miller early on in the podcast, she is an ambassador for soccer resilience. And it just we've been able to have a couple conversations and just I've really enjoyed getting to know Cara. So I'm excited that we get to share this conversation with you. So Cara, how are you doing today?
Oh, today I'm doing really well. Thanks. Thanks for asking. I've had a great morning, kind of doing my thing, got a couple of big projects done. So feeling ready for this conversation. Thanks for having me here.
Awesome. Well, that's great because hopefully we'll get you on your best as we're going to talk about flow. We're talking about being in the zone, all these different cool things that we use. Now we're going to hear behind the scenes of what the science of that is today. Before we get there, though, I want to just, as we always start, just really be able to share your story and how you became passionate about mental fitness, mental wellness in athletes, and how you got to be doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. It started young. I was a figure skater, and it's funny because I wanted to play hockey. My brothers played hockey, but there was no girls hockey back then. So as I said, I had to put the white skates on, and they got
Yeah.
to put the cool skates on. So,
My
so
wife played hockey with her brother. She was the goalie all the time for her brother. We probably can relate to that. So my wife grew up in Minnesota. Same dream for her. But yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Absolutely right, and so we were rink rats for sure. I spent a lot of my time on the ice, and I learned at a really young age, what it felt like to be in my body. Because figure skating, there's not a whole lot of give there. I mean, if
Mm,
you're not on that thin edge of a thin blade, you're on your butt. So
hmm
what I learned at probably like 12, we had to do something called figures back then. And figures, they're just drills, right? I mean, all athletes know that you got to spend time doing the drills. And so back then we would be given a clean patch of ice, and I had to draw a figure eight over and over for an hour. Now they don't do figures. We used to test on it. They don't do figures in the sport anymore because so many skaters hated it and really rebelled against it. I loved it because it was quiet time where I got to really just be in my body on the ice. And one thing I noticed about figures, and I think it's important because I think all athletes can relate to this, but with figures, I had an hour to kind of spend with myself doing this, was that when I would start thinking about what I was doing, whether I was on an outer edge, an inner edge, backward, forward, whenever I got into my head, I went flat on my blade.
mm,
And so I couldn't perform that figure eight the way I was supposed to. And so it was like a game I played with myself back then at 12. I was like, okay, how could I not think at all for this whole circle? And so what I didn't realize I was doing was I was training my mind.
mm.
It was a mindfulness practice every time I did figures. And so, of course, I had no words for it. I just
Right.
kind of felt it. Then as a competitive runner in college, I ran the 800. I had that sense again, and I started to understand what it felt like to be either just in your body or in your head and in your body. And certainly my races were nothing. If I was filled with doubt and fear and worry and anxiety and comparison and all those millions of thoughts that come through our head
Yep.
during competition, if we allow it to. So again, that was just mind training without knowing what I was doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so fast forward to today, now you're doing all these different things. So how'd you go from being an athlete who feels that zone, so to speak? I remember you talking in another talk you gave about your last race in college. You've really felt like it all came together, right? So you go from that to then saying, I want to teach others this. I want to learn more. I want to go deeper. What triggered that? And then what did that look like? And what was that path to where you are now?
Yeah. So it was my last college track race, and I had been a mediocre athlete, honestly, and a lot of it had to do with I just, it was like my upbringing. We were just my parents were more careful with us,
Mm-hmm.
so didn't kind of give us that freedom to go for it. And so it was my last college track race, and I ran the race of my life. I ran it because I had nothing to lose. And I had done a bunch of things pre-race that I had never done before to settle my system, my nervous system, my body, and my mind. And so, really, what happened during that race was, one, I shifted into a flow state, and two, I awakened the potential that I always had. And I think that's a really important point because it really led me into everything I do now. When I finished that race, it was a playoff race, and I came in third, and my whole team was like, "What just happened?" And I was like, "What just happened?" And I knew, and I sat there on the track, and I was like, "Oh my God, like, why did I wait to my last race to do this?" And of course, I didn't know, because I didn't even know what happened to me. But what I realized then and there was that if I could learn how to train myself to access whatever I had accessed, which now we call flow, then anything I did, I would do well. Like, I knew it. And so that sent me on my journey to understand how to train the body and mind for optimal performance. And the whole awakening of potential, what I realized as well in that moment was that we all have these latent capacities, these strengths, this intelligence in us. Every single human being has this intelligence. And so I became really enamored with understanding how to awaken potential and then how to help others do it as well. And
Yeah.
so it's taken many different forms. I found yoga and meditation back in the early 90s because it was really the disciplines. As an athlete, I want to be told what to do. Give me
Mm-hmm.
my training and I'll do it. I'm
Yeah.
disciplined, right? And so the yogis and the meditators had thousands of years of traction already. And so I leaned into those practices to understand how to train the body and mind.
Yeah, and so it's gone beyond that now, and we'll get into some of that later, some of the different programs and things that you're doing. But before we get there, I want to go into the science behind flow. I mean, we talk about it. We usually don't say flow in the context of a game. We say, but we do often say, at least I'm not going to say, some people might, but I don't. You're in the zone, right? So it's that same idea. Or if you ever played NBA jams, folks out there, that's when you're on fire and fuego and you can't miss a shot. Basically, that's what we're talking about here. So can we talk about that a little bit? Just this idea of, and we'll get to later the idea of the gut brain connection and all these things that I know now you're really passionate about sharing about. But before we get there, talk about the science behind the flow, the zone, and really how we can do the mental fitness. And you've talked about mental fitness cross training and some other conversations out there as well. So can you just get into that and talk about how we can actually intentionally create and recreate being in the zone or being in flow?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like I said, I didn't have a word for it back then, but years later, Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi wrote his seminal book called Flow. And he talked about, and he is a researcher, he talked about understanding optimal experience. And what he found was that there are certain triggers that help our body and mind kind of get locked into this optimal state where we feel our best and do our best. And some of those some of those flow triggers are high consequence. So if it's a big game, if it's a big presentation, if you're, climbing, rock climbing, or if jumping out of planes, you're going to most likely go ahead and drop right into flow just because of the consequences involved in what you're doing. But then there are other flow triggers, and I can talk about them a little bit more as well, which are having clear goals, having immediate feedback, having just enough challenge to keep you focused, to keep you engaged. There's big nature, like if you were, at the top of a mountain or on a beach or under the stars. There's all these different ways that we can access this optimal state of awareness. And so what's happening when we shift into flow, and it's not something we live in all the time. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why we're not living in flow all the time is because there's this cascade of neurochemicals that are flooding our system, flooding our nervous system and our brain, that's helping a few things happen. And I'll go through this. And I will say off the bat, a lot of this comes from Csikszentmihalyi. And then after Csikszentmihalyi put out his work, some of two guys that I've worked closely with, Jamie Wheel and Stephen Kotler, have really taken all of Csikszentmihalyi's work and put it into actionable language that most of us can understand. So they talk about flow, and they use the acronym STER, STER. So think about this. If you're listening, if you're an athlete or not an athlete or coaching, about how or when you may feel this. So S stands for selflessness. So when we're in flow, we forget about that inner critic. That inner critic isn't barraging our mind with, you're not enough, you can't do this, you've never done this before, you don't have the training, you don't have the education. That all powers down. And there's an anatomical reason why it happens. And some of that has to do with these neurochemicals that are flooding our system. So there's this feeling of selflessness. Then there's timelessness. And so there's that understanding of when we're fully present, deeply in the now, time either speeds up or slows down. There's this warped sense of time where, you could be in flow when you're writing, when you're doing a podcast, when you're playing, and then all of a sudden, game's over, or all of a sudden, 10 hours went by and you haven't even eaten lunch. Mm-hmm. So there's selflessness, timelessness. Then there's effortlessness, where everything you do seems to be clicking into place, right? You're on fire. You're in your game. You can't fail. For me in that race, I was running, I felt like a gazelle. I remember feeling like my toes weren't even touching the track. So there's this sense of effortlessness in what you're doing. Richness is the R, the final one. And when you're in flow, when you're fully present, deeply in the now, you are in this full concentration mode, and your senses light up. You may see more vividly, hear more clearly. You may sense your teammates on the field, on the court, without even knowing where they are. You just know. So there's this intelligence that comes online, that when we're living in our head or playing in our head, we literally don't have access to. And so I would tell, I've done a lot of training with college teams, and specifically, I remember the Villanova basketball team, because my business was right up the road from Villanova University. And I would tell the players all the time, and I remember them specifically because they were headed into the Final Four. And I would tell them that, if you play in your head, it is almost like a garage door, like one of those big, heavy doors closes down between your head and your body, shutting you off from this unbelievable amount of intelligence and experience that you have stored up in your body. And so as athletes, your body, your physical body is well trained. And you've got information in there from every game you played, every goal you scored, every coaching session you ever sat in on. Like, you've got that all stored there. But if you play from your head, in your mind, then that garage door doesn't give you access. When we're in flow, there is complete access to all of that intelligence. And that's why we can't fail. So it's a long-winded way of saying, remember that STER, selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness is what flow may feel like for you.
So how do we get there?
Good question. So you can train to know how to access flow, right? So we can't force our way into flow. In fact, Stephen Kotler often says, flow follows focus. And I think that's the easiest way to understand. When you are focused on your drill, on your pregame warm-up, on tying your boots, when you are focused, it will set up your nervous system, your whole body, mind, to be able to access flow more easily.
And I know in the talk you did for the mental health summit that Soccer Resilience did, you talked about the cross training that goes into it, to the importance of sleep, the importance of the mind train, the mindfulness training that we're hearing about, breathing techniques, different things along those lines, and some other things. Can you talk through that quickly as well, just to give the different aspects of it before we go kind of deeper into the gut brain connection and all that conversation that I'd like to do?
Yes, absolutely. And this is, I feel like, where my sweet spot is, because I've done so much training in yoga, in meditation, in strength training, and all kinds of physical practices. And then also in the mental training, is that you can't think your way to optimal performance. There's got to be something that comes into sync. The body and mind start to synchronize so that there's this harmony, balance, and coherence when you start to play, or when you go to practice, or when you go to speak, or whatever it is you're performing. And so there are ways and things that we can do to hone that balance, to sharpen that synchronized state. And it comes down to these body-mind practices and how we cross-train to build this mental fitness, this feeling of being congruent, coherent, clear, calm, all at the same time. And so when I talk about cross-training for mental fitness, I like to talk about it that way, because most of us understand we need to cross-train for physical fitness. We can't just walk. We can't just strength train. We've got to mix it up. It's the same thing for if we want to feel mentally fit all the time. So it comes down to moving your body, right? Which is, if you're an athlete, you're doing all the time. So I don't need to go there. Mm-hmm. It comes down to mind training, mindfulness training, some type of mindset training, or a combination of both. Then, of course, there's sleep. I mean, sleep is having its heyday now. The research is there. We need 8 hours plus. We need to focus on recovery, or it's game over. Honestly, the body starts to go into stress mode, and we can't possibly perform at our best if we're in stress mode. So sleep, movement, nutrition, clean eating, mood. Our mood is affected 100% by the food that we intake. So clean. And I'm not going to tell you guys how to eat, because we all have our own thing going on there. But then there are other things like gratitude practice, time in nature, focus on recovery. There is, just being curious about things outside of our general realm of things that we learn about, to help the mind train to take in different types of information. There's play just for the sake of play. And then there's also gut-brain optimization, which is this new field for high performers that I'm so stoked about.
Yeah.
Oh, and I forgot breath training. I knew there was one, breath training.
which is, and I know that I talked a lot with Brad Miller about that. So if you want to hear some about the mindfulness practices, we go back and listen to that. I'll link to it in the show notes with Brad. He's a great guy who's done a lot in this field as well. So, one thing I want to just touch on real quick is you mentioned training and moving your body and the training we do as athletes and then play. And I think today what we're seeing in youth sports, especially, is, and I'm going to get Dan O'Neill on, who's a exercise scientist as well, in a few episodes, but the distinction between play and the training, and why it's important to play and not just train the intense training, but to have unstructured play, and why that's important. Why is that distinction different, and why is it important to do both?
Well, I think that, and I'm not a play researcher, but from the little bit that I've studied about it, there's different neurochemicals that come online. There's different ways that it fuels and feeds our sense of wellness and well-being and lightness and joy. And all of that, it adds to our mental fitness just as much as a serious training a session. My daughters played high level soccer. One of my daughters played Division I. They were both ODP. They were kind of we were in it as a soccer family. And if there's any regret I have, because I think the training and the discipline that my girls learned from the sport really serves them now as they're in their mid 20s. But the one thing I wish they had more of was just unstructured playtime, even with their team. Like if they had more fun times, and they would work with a trainer who was really a phenomenal trainer. And he had lots of games that they played. And both girls have said, I wish I had spent more time with Regan and less time traveling to tournaments.
Yeah. No, and the coach of my daughter's team is talking about just having scrimmages on just fun, not even scrimmage, like not, say coaches get out of the way and just whoever wants to show up in the club on Saturday, show up at the fields. We have the fields anyway. Let's just play. And I love that idea. And, my son's just my 10-year-old, finally I have 5 kids, and my fifth is saying, Dad, I'm going to the park. I'm like, finally, he just let him go. And he just hops on his scooter. We got him one of those watches. We know where he is. And he can, just be home by dark. I feel like, we're back in, my childhood, which is so, so awesome. And I just love it. And, you still it's a different world and all those things, but at the same time, some things have changed, but a lot of things haven't. And that's one is the kids need to just get out and goof around and be kids. And so, and we as adults need to do that too. And that's the thing is, they say kids will be kids. Yeah. But we need to be playing. We need to be doing just fun and getting out into nature. Like you said, just going for a walk and just goofing around and laughing. And my brother just celebrated his 50th birthday. And one of the things his kids said to him, which was super encouraging for me to hear about my brother, they said, we just went around the table and shared what we love about him. And one of his daughters said, it's, you're still a kid in a lot of ways with us. You still play, you still have fun. And I love that, and I hope my kids would say the same thing. I mean, cause there's that balance. You got to be a dad, which is number one, but to be able to have that time to just play and laugh with your family and with your kids. So anyway, all right. So now we get to move on to what we talked about. I kind of teased this enough. Now let's get to this. And you did too as well, but this gut heart brain connection, really how it impacts our mental and physical wellness. And just, I mean, first of all, what is it? What are we talking about when we hear about microbiomes and all these things? It can be like anything else. I just had Dan Abrams on, and he can talk at a PhD level, and we can also bring it down to what does it mean to us, and what does it look like, and how can we maximize our, gut brain health and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to say first that, I've spent my whole career, my whole life understanding optimal performance, awakening human potential. How do we experience life more fully? How do we bring more joy in our lives? Like, so for me, I've gone down so many different rabbit holes. And when I learned about the new science of the gut brain connection about 3 years ago, I knew in that moment that it was going to change everything. I just knew it. And I also knew that I could never just teach meditation, yoga, mindset training. Like I could never just teach these body mind practices without talking about the gut brain. Because what we're learning, and the science is new, it's 5 to 6 years old. We are learning that what comes out of our gut and what is the up way, not the down way, what is going up the gut. I never said that before. But what is communicated between our gut and our brain is unquestionable at this point. When our gut is healthy, our gut microbiome, which is this ecology of bacteria and viruses and other stuff, but when our gut ecology is healthy and balanced, this signaling, and I think that the real important aspect here for you all to understand, it's the signaling, it's the communication between the gut and the brain. When that is clear and sharp, we feel mentally focused. We have mental acuity, which is mental sharpness. We have mental flexibility and agility. We feel wonderful. Our mood is better. We can focus. We can experience other people's joy. I mean, it goes on and on. When the communication between the gut and the brain, the signaling is off, like we're at 3G instead of 5G, we feel foggy. It's brain fog. That's what it is. We feel confused. We're distracted. We may not be able to hear things as well. We're not sharp. We're not flexible. We may not connect with others as well. And so what we're learning from the gut-brain connection and the gut-brain access is that starting at the root, starting at the gut, through better food, through less stress, less toxins, and if we can, less pharma, because those are the 4 things that will throw our gut off. If we can improve those 4 things, it will improve the signaling through the immune system and the nervous system. And when the signaling's improved, our mental wellness is improved. We can go from dealing with on one side of the continuum, sadness, anxiety, depression, ADHD, and others to mental wellness, which is feeling more like you're not like you're just normally happy and wonderful and life is good, to the optimal side of the continuum, which is where I live and teach from, which is mental fitness. So mental fitness is optimized mental wellness. And we can now understand through better food and food supplements. So we are learning about specific strains of probiotics, specific micronutrients and plant that will improve that gut-brain connection. And this is a lot of the work that I'm doing right now. And I'm represent a company that's really at the forefront of this all. It's going to change sports in the next 5 years because more and more people are going to recognize that this is going to be their mental edge, is the gut-brain connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know I'll put that video you shared with me. If you tell me the product again,
The Happy Juice.
That company, that the video I watched on I forget the doctor's name, but he talked about how the gut brain connection and the gut, right bacteria in the gut causes lower depression, fatigue, tension, anger, confusion, the brain fog, and increases vigor, which, is defined as physical energy, mental acuity, and emotional well-being. And I think this is during COVID for various reasons. We've had more depression. We've had more mental health issues. We've had more brain fog from COVID long haul, from these other things. Is this stuff that will, I know it's impossible to know exactly what's causing COVID long COVID and all these different things, but has there been any testing with this type of study with the bacteria in the gut, and as far as the COVID long haul and things like that?
It's coming. It is coming. So I can't speak to it definitively, but I know that it's being tested and it's coming. And I will attest to, I had COVID and I experienced COVID brain fog.
Mm-hmm.
And my trajectory was much shorter. The path out of the whole COVID brain fog, which I understand for some it's weeks and months. For me, it was just a few days. And I do believe that's because of the healthy microbiome that I've been cultivating for the last couple of years. And so if you're interested, the book Mental Fitness just came out in the last year or so by Dr. Sean Talbot. He is the chief formulator for Amari Global, which is this company that is, and he is really at the forefront of the gut brain science when it comes to mental performance.
Yeah. And he's the one in the video that you sent to me.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Absolutely. So folks, check out that video. If this interests you at all, check out the video that I'll put in the show notes. It has some different, things that you can look at and different supplements, and that are presumably the supplements are these bacterias and microbiomes helping the microbiome to be able to function properly. Is that what the supplements are doing?
That's right. And what's so interesting about where we are right now is we're getting very, very clear on the science of what exactly we can put in our gut to help us feel clearer, calmer, more confident, more agile. I mean, this is super exciting. And so what Sean will often say, and what I often say, is that mental fitness isn't all in your head. Mental performance isn't all in your head. A lot of it happens below the neck, in your gut, in your nervous system, immune system, and your heart.
Yeah. And let's just be clear, though. This is a both and conversation we're having here. This isn't an either or. You're not saying like, hey, you can go out and you can, smoke, drink to your heart's content, eat like crud, and take these supplements and you'll be good to go. You don't need to breathe. You don't need to sleep. It's a both and, right? You need to eat clean. You need to sleep well. You need to be doing the mental training. You need to be doing the play and all of that, and be making sure that we're getting this done too. Is that fair?
100%. Yeah. I have a cross-training grid for mental fitness. It's free. I'm happy to share it with you all. And it just lists all of those out. And you can just see in the course of a week, am I checking enough boxes? Is this a well-balanced cross-training for my mental wellness?
Yeah, absolutely. And, like anything else, it's not like a guarantee that if you do all these things, you'll be mentally healthy, because you might not be honest about it. First of all, you might not understand some of the stressors that are going on. You might not have owned those stressors too, right? So I know that's a lot of part of the work that John Sarno did and Caroline Leaf with the mind brain connection and the power of the mind, so to speak. And so there's so much to this. But I love, just more we learn about the different parts of the body and how our body is this miraculous thing that works together, and nothing is by itself just doing its thing. It's all connected and interconnected. And so I think the more we learn, the more we can put these pieces together and hopefully, be able to be healthier in every way. So that's great. Yeah. So if you could share that, where can people find it? Just, is it a website that they can go to look at
they can go to my website, carabradley.net, and that'll give you all the information you need to download the cross-training grid, to get information on Amari and those protocols. And yeah, it's pretty simple. It's all there.
Yeah. So we'll have that, carabradley.net. We'll have that on the show notes. If you want to just go there and click it, you can also just type it in yourself, Cara Bradley. So, so we'll have that like I said, in the show notes. You can go check that out. I encourage you to do so, folks, because this is stuff that isn't just for athletes. This is for literally everyone in your family, in your life that you care about, to be able to understand all of these different things that we need to do to ensure that we can give ourselves the best chance of being mentally healthy and like you said, living in that optimal performance. We want to be able to live at our fullest at any given time. So I think I have an idea of how you're going to answer this next question, but I want to hear from you. What is your personal why? What is that purpose statement that you live by, and how are you living it out in your life?
Yeah, it is definitely to do my part to help awaken human potential.
Mm.
We have so much to share out there. Every single person we meet in the stores has so much to share with the world. And if we were all in the process of awakening those dormant, latent capacities, then I believe our world would be a happier place. So that is without a doubt my why. And I live it every day because I am a continued student and learning all the time.
Yeah, I can tell that just a little. I've gotten to know you, that you are a learner, which I am too, which is why I think we've connected on that for sure. All right, so now you're learning something a little new than you probably have ever before. Where recently you've intentionally become house free, and I think I saw you say that. It's probably to make sure people know you're not homeless. But you've gone house free, and just have a lot less stuff now. What have you learned in that? Well, first of all, what am I talking about there? And then what have you learned in that process and in that journey that you're on?
Yeah, and it's a temporary journey. It's not forever, but my husband and I sold our yoga and meditation business in the Philadelphia area right before COVID. And we decided we had been at it for 16 years and had to be there all the time. So we decided we didn't want to have to be anywhere. So we gave up the house and gave up the stuff. And so now we live for 2 to 3 months at a time in different areas in the country and just do short-term rentals. And what I have learned, and we call this our process of untangling.
Mm.
We have untangled so many layers of conditioning, just social conditioning from our culture of what it means to be successful. We've untangled so much within ourselves. I've learned how to let go and be flexible and let things roll and just be present and be at home anywhere. That has been such an extraordinary gift. And I tell people all the time, it may not be for you, or maybe you start by just untangling your physical stuff a little bit, but I feel so light and free. And so it allows me to do my work more effectively and impact the world more and help others just because I feel light and unencumbered.
Yeah. No, that's I bet there's a lot of people out there going, "Ooh, that sounds good." But like you said, it's probably not for everybody. I love what you said there just about being present. I think that's something that whatever it takes for us to be more present in a world that's so noisy and so constantly just distractions everywhere. And it's one of the things I really am very proud of my 19-year-old son. And he says, I don't like the fact that when I text him and I'm wondering where he is, he doesn't get back to me right away. But he says, Dad, when I'm with my friends, I really want to be present. So I put my phone away. And, it's hard to argue with
Wow.
that, right? I don't know if he's just feeding me a line or if he's actually doing that, but I think he is. I mean, and knowing how he is and who he is, I just really, I mean, are you kidding me? Like, how many 19-year-old kids would you hear say that? I mean, so
Wow.
it's just whatever we can do, whatever it takes us to do. And I think a lot of these mindfulness practices will do that, will help us to be present, but also sometimes we need to do some bigger things to be able to. I know for me, to be present is really difficult. I'm always thinking about the next thing. I'm always thinking about what else I have to do. And so like when you were talking about being in the flow or being in the zone, all I think about is my best work from when it comes to writing and other stuff is from like midnight to 4 a.m, because nothing
Wow.
else is going on and people aren't calling and I'm not wondering what I'm missing. My FOMO is not in full force from midnight to 4. So again, some of that is interesting. What does it take for you to get present? And let's figure out how we can do that more. So I love that. All right. So before we get into our last two questions that we ask everybody, can you just briefly share? I know you mentioned your website, so folks, you can go there to learn about all these different things. But I know you have a best-selling book, as I mentioned early on, and you also have a podcast, and you're creating something for soccer resilience too. So can you just share the the few different products, few different things that you have that can help our audience in these different areas that we've talked about today?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that opportunity. My book is called On the Verge, Wake Up, Show Up, and Shine. And it really is about living in your natural state of clear mind, bright body, and open heart. So it's about how to be present. And I talk a lot about my work with sports teams in the book as well, and my experience as an athlete. So how do we wake up, show up, and shine every day? And really it comes down to being as present as often as much as possible. And my podcast is called On the Verge as well. And that is a daily podcast. I go Monday through Friday. They're short, 6 to 8 minute snippets and tips, mental fitness tips, stories, inspirations, motivations. I get into flow when I record those. I absolutely love it. I'm like right there at the edge of my seat whenever I'm recording. So you can check that out as well. And the work that I'm doing with Amari and with the Mental Wellness Company is to partner with different organizations to help to educate different populations on gut, brain, mental wellness. And because I think that at this point in our mental wellness or mental health pandemic, there are just way too many people suffering. And so we need to offer natural solutions for people, to kids, especially kids, for kids and anybody else that may be feeling like they're languishing or depressed or having, a lot of anxiety, to improve their mental wellness and to hopefully experience mental fitness. So again, all of that can be found on my website. Just reach out to me. I'm a person at the end of the email, and I'd love to get into conversation with anybody who's curious.
And what is that email address?
Cara at carabradley.net.
Keep it simple. Same name for the podcast, for the book. Cara's trying to keep it simple so you can focus on the things that matter. And you can be present in other areas. All right. So last couple questions. What lessons learned directly from sports? Also sports for you. It could be soccer with your girls, or figure skating, or track, or rollerblade. I got to ask that. What the heck is that? All right, so the rollerblading around the world, like in your 20s. I saw that on your bio, and I'm like, all right. So before we get into this other question, that I think was probably what something was burning on people's minds. Tell us about that?
All right. Well, I'll be quick about it. But since I was a figure skater, I was living in New York City and skating, and I had a friend that owned a skate shop, and he started carrying these things called rollerblades. It was in the late 80s. And so he asked me to teach in Central Park. If anybody bought a pair of skates, he'd send them to the park and I'd teach them how to skate, because rollerblades and figure skating are very similar. And then so I ended up auditioning for Team Rollerblade, which is the performance team for the company. And they were at the time sending us around the world, educating people on what inline skating was, rollerblading. And so we did hip hop shows on rollerblades, under the Eiffel Tower and all over Japan and all over many other places.
All right. So if you have a video of that, you need to share it, and we can put that on the show notes. I'm just saying, if there's something on YouTube or Vimeo or something, we got to find that. I got to find that. That'd be fantastic. All right. If not, we're all gonna be bummed and disappointed, but that's okay. That's okay. All right, that's so cool. Doing rollerblade show at the base of the Eiffel Tower. I mean, that's just, that doesn't get much better than that. All right, so back to this question: what lessons learned directly from sports have you used in your marriage and your parenting?
I think it's consistency. As an athlete, I just learned the importance of consistent action, even if it's small actions, but it has served me well in my marriage. I've been married 31 years, and my daughters as well learn that in their own sport. I think it's one of the most important reasons why we should get kids involved in youth sports, is just to understand that slow build is really the name of the game.
Oh, that's great. That's so good. All right. Last question. What have you read, watched, listened to that has informed your thinking on how soccer and other sports explain life and leadership?
Well, as we talked about before the podcast, I asked about Ted Lasso, because I'm such a fan from a leadership perspective, but I'm going to give you another one. And that was a book I read a few years ago by Diana Nyad, the swimmer. And it's called Oh my gosh, I forgot. It's something about why. Find your why. No, it wasn't find your why. Find a way. That's it. Find a
Okay.
way. Find a way. And she swam from Cuba to Miami. She
Mm,
was the first human to ever do that. Took
wow.
her many, many attempts. And her mantra was find a way.
Mm.
And it's definitely something that I have lived with that. And after reading that book, it just, it ingrained it in my brain. Find a way. If you want it, find a way. You may have to be flexible. You may have to change course, but find a way to do it.
Now that's a great way to finish this interview. Thank you, Cara, for being a part of the conversation. Thank you for all that you're doing. Just super, super encouraged by everything we were able to talk about today.
Thank you so much, Phil. It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, folks. So once again, thank you for being a part of the conversation as well. If you want to go deeper with coaching the bigger game, which we've talked about on this show and we've talked about on the off-season talks as well, you can do that at coachingthebiggergame.com. You can also get involved and find out more about what Paul and Marcy Jobson are doing with the Warrior Way program at warriorwaysoccer.com. And, if you want to have any questions, if you have any guests that you think would be good on this show, please reach out to me, Phil at howsoccerexplainsleadership.com. And if you have any questions that you have for me, or I'd love to be able to have a conversation with you there as well. So as always, folks, we hope that you're taking everything that you're learning from this show and you're using it to be a better parent, to be a better spouse, to be a better leader in whatever capacity you are leading, and to continually remind you that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great week.